Welcome into Ethan Skolnick Starting 9 here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Interesting night last night. We will get into it here as we go forward. I got a great guest today, Alfredo Arteaga from 3 Yards Per Carry. He and I will discuss the Tua situation. I was at that game on Sunday, and I don't know how I survived it. Now we're going to see if Tua actually makes it to Thursday and starts, and I do think we should touch on it today, even though, of course, everybody's going to want to touch on what happened in the Heat game last night. Well, what happened with us was we were at a watch party Quarterdeck in Sunrise, and so we apologize not to anybody for the food because the food was great, or the drinks because the drinks were great. We had a good time together. Had almost 40 people there in total in the back, but I want to apologize for us throwing a watch party because I know that a lot of people are blaming us for what happened to the Heat last night. My producer Manny Chang was there as well, but it wasn't just the Heat. We also jinxed the Panthers, who had their first regulation loss of the entire season. To apologize for that, I'm wearing the Panthers shirt that you can get on our website over at 5reasonsports.com. But thanks to everybody who came out. It was a terrific time, and we gave away a bunch of hats with a bunch of silly trivia questions, and also my last Bubble Dribble shirt if you want a Myers-Leonard special. But we're going to talk about the Jokic play, obviously, and we're going to talk about what happened with the Heat last night. Before we do, I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel and the network, which is Underdog Fantasy. You could not get a prop yesterday for whether Jokic would armbar somebody from behind. But you can get a prop on pretty much anything else. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the code 5RSN. I keep telling people, like, we're giving you $10. Well, I'm not giving it to you. It doesn't have anything to do with me. But they're giving you $10 based on our code. So they're giving you $10. Most of the games on there are $5 or $3. So literally, you can get your $10 and then give it a shot a couple times and see if you like it. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com. They got the up-downs on every game now with the players, but also you can do these drafts. So like in a given night, like you can draft like 3 guys. They're going against somebody else's 3 guys. So it would make like, your average Thursday night football game more interesting than it typically is. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the code 5RSN. All right, let's get to it from last night. And this was one of those games where you just knew that the Heat were not going to get themselves back into it. Like, we were watching the watch party in the back, and they didn't shoot well from the beginning. And it's one thing, we're starting to say, okay, what could be problems for this Heat team? And, when you play their schedule and you have their record, there's not a lot to complain about. Like, I mean, they've basically gone through a murderer's row of teams and venues and everything else, and, they're 7-3. So I don't want this to be like a panic show. They're going to play 2 in LA. I'm actually going to be at both those games. Again, I apologize. But they're both winnable games. The Lakers are not playing very well right now. They don't have LeBron. The Clippers don't have Kawhi. They're kind of up and down depending on the night. So they can win both of those games, actually. And both of those, to me, look less daunting than the situation in Denver, even though all of us on Before 4 picked the Heat because the way they've been playing lately, I think we all got caught up in it. But we know the history in Denver. It has nothing to do with our watch parties. And the history in Denver is that the Heat sometimes get run off the floor. And sometimes they get run off the floor in a situation where, it's because they don't shoot the ball well early. And we saw that. We saw that in this game. They didn't shoot the ball well early, and so what happened was it bled into their defense. Their spacing was not good offensively, which is something that has typically been good. And guys were kind of running into each other a little bit. I don't even know what that is. Manny, you got to tell me specifically what that is here. November 29th. What is that, Judgment Day? The movie? I don't know. Anyway, so they didn't shoot well, and it bled into their defense. And then they really just couldn't get a stop. Like, every time they got close, oh, yes, Denver comes to Miami. Thank you very much. Oh, wow. That's not that far away. That's right after Thanksgiving. Great, I'll be there. So there was frustration. Okay, I mean, there was frustration, and there was frustration as you were watching that game because the officiating was awful. And also, the Heat kept sort of showing that they were going to make a little bit of a run. They would cut it to 11, and then it would fall apart again, go back up to 17 or 18, and then come back down again, and then go back up again. And so I think there was frustration on the Heat's part in general with everything that was going on. Did Markieff Morris, foul Jokic in a hard way? Yes, he did. Did he deserve that? No. No. And look, Jimmy's reaction, I was getting, as we were at the watch party, I was getting texts from a bunch of people. I can just tell you that someone reasonably close to Jimmy texted and said he fucked with the wrong one. So, this is not over. It's not over. We're going to see what the suspension is for Jokic. In my view, it should be 5 games. And we had others at our watch party who said 10 right away. I don't think they're going to do that. And I don't know if it has anything to do with him being the NBA MVP or not. They don't really promote Nikola Jokic. I mean, it's not LeBron, right? I mean, he's having a tremendous season. Like, nobody wants to vote for him for MVP again, right? I mean, his game is beautiful to watch, but it's not sellable. Okay, so, I mean, you don't see Jokic on a bunch of different commercials this offseason after winning MVP, right? And he plays in Denver, which plays into it. But, I mean, Giannis plays in Milwaukee. And you start to see him on more stuff. And both, we're not born here. So, I mean, he's not a player that the NBA is trying to sell. So I don't know that there's going to be, like, an influence on it that way. I just don't think they like suspending guys for more than 5 games. In fact, I don't even think he's going to get 5 games. Like, I bet you he gets 2. But I rewatched it when I got back very late last night. I took a look at Eric Spoelstra's pressers. You can find all of this stuff, by the way, on this YouTube channel. I don't know if that one's up yet, but I watched some of the clips that came in. And once those are all up, you can check them out. And Eric was visibly, I mean, he has great respect for other great players in the league. And he pushes them out there. Like, in other words, he talks them up. And to hear him go at Jokic last night gave you an indication of how pissed off they were. So where do you go from here? Again, I don't think he's going to get more than a 2-game suspension. Okay. As Manny mentioned, Judgment Day is November 29th. But I do think that long-term, what happened last night is probably good for this team. If you go back historically through the teams that have won big, they have moments, right? Where they're fighting with each other or fighting with the other team, and it kind of pulls them even closer together. Remember, these guys are not going home for another week, so they're going to be together. So this is how they opened an important road trip at the start of the season, was with this confrontation with the NBA's MVP in a game that you didn't play well in. I think this could have positive effects going forward. I think the way that Jimmy reacted in particular to have the back of his teammate, well, I mean, in a different way than Jokic did, obviously. I think that's something that will bind them a little bit more. So there's really 2 things to discuss here. What happened? I mean, what happened is Jokic deserves a suspension. That's what happened, okay? But what happens from here is how the Heat fuel the rest of their road trip. They're going to be spending a couple nights together in Los Angeles. We will be providing coverage live from there. Maybe not from some of the spots they go. And then like I said, they got 2 games at Staples. And I think that what they are finding now as a team is that there are certain things that they can get to consistently, and there are other things that will come and go a little bit. And sometimes it comes and goes during the same game, like the Utah game, where everything was perfect, right, from the third quarter until about 3/4 of the way through the fourth, and then it fell apart there at the very end in the last 3 minutes. So they have to be on point. Like, they're not. I think what we found is they're really good. And losing in Denver to me doesn't disqualify them from that. They're really good. I mean, teams lose in Denver, but they're not so perfect that they can overcome certain things. And one thing, obviously, is if they shoot poorly at the start of the game, it does seem to seep into the rest of their play. So they've got to clean that up a little bit, okay? Kyle Lowry was bad last night offensively. I mean, there's no way around it. Like, he was tremendous against Utah, and he was bad last night. Like, even Hall of Famers have off nights, okay? It happens. So I'm not going to overreact to that either. Duncan Robinson got going a little bit from 3. Maybe that is something that they can build on. Hero did not play particularly well, especially compared to the way he played against Utah. So, there were some things going against them in a road game in Denver, and I have seen things go against Dwayne and LeBron and Chris Bosh and others in Denver. And so, don't color me shocked that happened last night. Watch party or no watch party. But I think that we're seeing from last night is that this is a team that is very close. Like, they're not taking any shit from anybody. They're just not. Okay? And even in the game, like, that was a game, like, you could feel like, again, they were going to push as hard as they could. I tweeted during the game. I said they don't play. They're not playing particularly well, but they will play this thing to the end. And they did play it to the end, and that's part of what ended up happening. They were playing it to the end. There was frustration. Morris's foul was a little bit hard, but again, nothing of great significance. And then Jokic's reaction was totally nuts. And I'll say this about it. Remember last year when Jokic got tossed? I thought he got the raw end of that. He got the raw end of that. Like, I don't know. The officials tossed him, in my view, for no reason. They pretty much ended that series. Last night, after what happened, whatever NBA punishment is meted out will be deserved. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about today, and we're going to bring Alfredo on to talk about it here at 9:15, is that the Dolphins have a game on Thursday that nobody seemingly cares about because they all think the outcome is going to be awful. They have this horrible history against the Ravens, which, goes back decades at this point. And they seem to be hiding something with their quarterback situation. And I know everybody's like, well, you're going for clicks to talk about too. I think you have to talk about it, right? Like, what was that on Sunday? What was that? Like, I was there. I watched it. I got there just in time for the end of warm-ups. And I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, this guy seems like he can make the throws, but Brian Flores says he couldn't make all the throws. Not all the throws we needed him to make. Well, with all due respect, he seems like a very nice guy and a very intelligent guy and all the rest of that, and he's a great local story. But what throws could Jacoby Brissett make on a given basis? Like what? Which throws? Short, intermediate, deep? So, how bad did Tua have to look to them to not start? And then, well enough to back up, right? Now, again, I know they didn't keep Reed Sinnett. They would have had to elevate a quarterback from the practice squad. All of this is not great, but like if he, I don't know, he couldn't make all the throws, so you had him in there as the backup just in case. And then how? So he was just there in case Brissett's offensive line destroyed him, which nearly happened. And he doesn't help the situation. CK, our guy over at 3 yards per carry with Alfredo, he tweeted out the release times of various quarterbacks, and Tua is one of the fastest, and Brissett's one of the slowest. So you basically just played into the defense's hands. Now, you won the game, but it reminded me of those Hurricane games that I went to a couple years ago when Williams was the quarterback. And they had a big breakout. I think it was against Louisville, and everybody was all excited. But then they had a couple of games where they squeaked out against Middle Tennessee Directional State, right? And the players are celebrating after, and you want to give them their joy. They work hard and they put it out there, and then they end up getting a W, and that's all anybody should care about. But there is such a thing as style points, and there is such a thing about treating your fans to actual entertainment. And so it was a little bit unnerving, as it's unnerving sometimes when the Hurricanes accept mediocrity. When the Dolphins players afterwards, seemed like it was the greatest thing ever that they just pulled out that game, and Brissett saying they played well in all three phases, and I'm like, that's the worst football game I've ever seen. And now we don't know who's playing quarterback on Thursday. We may get a better answer today, or a little bit clearer answer, but you're so boxed into a corner if you're the Dolphins right now, because if Tua doesn't play, it's this whole narrative again of he can't get on the field, or they babying him and all the rest of this. And if he does play, it's kind of like, why didn't he just play on Sunday? I don't know. Things heal, I guess, over the course of a week. But from what I saw on the practice field, looked to me like he could have gone against the Texans. All right, so we got those two stories. We're actually going to talk to our guy, Alfredo Arteaga, about both of them because he was at the watch party last night. He's the one who proclaimed 10 games for Jokic. Before we do, I want to tell you about another sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's our friends over at Everything Trade Shows, everythingtradeshows.com. That is where you go. If your company goes to trade shows, they do the entire booth build for you. You should definitely mention 5 Reasons because they'll give you a free rendering. They will do the whole damn thing for you and show you how it's going to look before you pay for it, okay, which is great. So that way you know exactly what you're getting. They teach you the difference between renting and buying, and they've got clients all over the place. Look at some of those names. I'll let you guys read them. But these are the types of companies that they work with. They're again, the best of the best locally and nationally. Why? Because they do the most complete job. we're going to start checking out their Twitter handle, which is Trade Show ETS, and you'll see some of the work that they do. But again, you can see some of it there. They handle it again from start to finish, and they just do great work. And that's our guy, Chris Chase. You can reach out to him. Again, mention 5 Reasons. They're based right here in Fort Lauderdale, but they service all 50 states. So wherever you're going to trade shows, convention centers, again, have reopened pretty much everywhere. So may have to wear a mask, but you still want to look at stuff, right? And you still want people looking at what your company has to offer. You know, a lot of these trade shows, they've got like hundreds of booths. How do you make yours stand out? This is the place that you want to go. And they're local, and they support us. And Chris is a great guy, and he's a big Miami sports fan, especially the Heat. So, like, why not, right? Reach out to him, everythingtradeshows.com. All right, I think we got our guest, right? We got our guy, Manny? Yes, no, yes, yay, nay. He's up. We're both awake. He looks a little better than I do because he threw on a hat. Appreciate that. He's Alfredo Arteaga from 3 Yards per Carry. He was with me at the watch party to end all watch parties and end all winning streaks and all of that good stuff that we did last night. We didn't really have a horse in the race with the Bears and the Steelers, right? So, like, we're not responsible for the 66-yard field goal clunking off the upright.
No, we're not responsible for that official essentially trying to fix the game at the end of the game by throwing that penalty on Marsh after he got that sack. Like, that was also disgraceful. So it was a bad night for officiating.
Bad night for officiating, bad night for watch partying, although we had a good time. So let's start with the Dolphins part of this, and we'll tease what happened with the Heat last night. But, I mean, I was at the game on Sunday, and I arrived, you know, I always say the only thing worse than Steve Ross's football team is parking. And so once I made it through the maze, I talked to 10 reps. I had ping parking, okay, who had absolutely no clue. They're like literally like, is this even in this stadium? And I ended up parking like way up close to the stadium somehow because I weaseled my way in because there was nobody there. Okay, but they were still directing you in all kinds of crazy places. But I got there in time to watch Tua make a few throws on the field. And then I was there in the press conference where Flores was asked about why he didn't play. And I'm just confused, I guess. I don't really understand it. Like, okay, so he's well enough to be your backup because you can't elevate anybody else. He's well enough to make throws on the field, but he can't start because we need to see more of Jacoby Brissett because the offensive line was going to get Tua killed. Why?
Yeah, I didn't understand it at all either. And then Tua did, you know, he did like that passive aggressive thing that some quarterbacks do, which is just keep throwing on the sideline the entire game. and then Landon Roberts, who is a Flores guy, goes up to him and has a long conversation with him toward the end of the game.
Oh, did you do the lip reading? Do you know?
I don't get it. You know, I trust Chris Kaufman that he can read lips, and everybody on Twitter seems to be able to read lips, but I just look at it and I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. You know?
Right.
I kind of can make out that he's saying coaching, but
right.
You know, I don't know what he's saying. Like, they're gonna have to tell us what exactly they said. But yeah, that game was
which they're not gonna do.
No.
I mean, there's
absolutely
no chance. No.
There's
I mean,
no
that's one of those.
will.
Well, you need a mic'd up segment, but they would filter that out, so you wouldn't even get it from that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, you know, I don't know. It's a bunch of body language, and you could tell after the game, Tua was walking off the field, and he looked, for lack of a better word, bored. Like, you know, like, why am I out here? You know.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, he wasn't the only one in the stadium who was bored. Maybe it's just because he had to watch that game.
Maybe.
I mean, a lot of us were bored. I literally forgot there was a game going on. I was in the press box talking to a friend who came up, and 6 minutes of the game passed, like 6 game minutes, and I was like, wait, there's still the first quarter? Like that first quarter was 42 minutes long. Mm-hmm. I mean, it shouldn't have been played at all. And the stadium looked, you know, the grass looked beautiful. It's a shame they ruined it. So yeah, now we go into Thursday, and I feel like this is like a Steve Ross Armageddon game because everybody knows he wanted to draft Lamar Jackson, right? And Lamar Jackson's coming home on national TV. The Dolphins are never competitive with the Ravens, and I mean, really, more than any other team in the league. Like, they're never competitive with. I mean, like we talk about the Heat Nuggets, which we will in a second. Like, this is much worse. Okay, the Dolphins and the Ravens.
Yes,
because it's everywhere. It's not just in Baltimore where Joe Flacco turned into Joe Montana. it's here, okay? It's here in South Florida that the Ravens always dominate them, going all the way back to playoff games and everything. But when the Dolphins ever get to a playoff game, they get stuck with the Ravens and they lose. But it's just I looking at it, it's like now you've got Lamar Jackson coming down, and you've got Tua, who it's like it feels like they're reluctantly playing. Like it's like, well, okay, fine. We have the worst backup quarterback situation in the league, so hey, kid, you want to throw a little bit? Like that's what this feels like now.
Yeah, I don't want to get into like conspiracies, but I got the sense of like they sat around and they said, you know what, Tua could really look kind of good against the Texans today. Maybe he puts up big numbers. You know, let's not let that happen. You know,
at this point,
that's what it makes it look like. That's what they were doing. Yeah, you know? And now he gets to play against a Ravens team that is not very good against the pass. And the great thing about the Ravens is they stop the run, and the Dolphins don't care about running the ball or are even capable of running the ball. So they have a matchup where they can make it entertaining if Tua plays.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of guys who may or may not play for a little bit, we were watching the watch party last night, and again, we weren't as engaged maybe in it as we typically are because it was just one of those nights you could just tell that just the Heat they didn't have it. Like from the very beginning, like they weren't guarding anybody, they weren't shooting the ball well, and then it did look like the thin air seemed to get to them a little. Lowry did not play well. Bam was kind of non-existent again, which is frustrating. And Jimmy was trying to carry them, but that was pretty much it. But just your take on the Morris Jokic sequence.
I've seen this happen in the NBA all the time. It happens all the time. A referee misses a call, and what you do is that you give a hard foul back to the guy who made the foul to let the referee know, call this one then.
Right.
Okay? You're not going to ignore me just because we're down 1,000 points. Because officials are supposed to call They're supposed to call fouls if you're down 30 or if you're down 1. It's not supposed to matter. And some of those fouls, especially the one against Bam was egregious. And he just stared at the referee like, you really are trying to get out of here, aren't you? Right. That's why I was telling you that, in the old days, Pat Riley would have made a mockery of those last 3 minutes. I would have called timeout, intentionally foul, put them on the line, and I would have tried to extend those last 3 minutes for like 45 minutes to an hour. Just to make an absolute joke of it, to emphasize, look, this is what you guys did to this game. And it happens all the time. What Jokic did, he took it one step further. He was just supposed to take that foul. He knows what he did. He knows that he got away with an egregious foul on Bam. And Markieff Morris just delivered a hard foul. Yeah, it was probably unnecessary. And he probably deserved to be maybe, I wouldn't say suspended, but thrown out of the game. Absolutely. Maybe a 1-game suspension for that foul. Because it was an intent. It had nothing to do with basketball. Jokic didn't have the ball. It wasn't through a screen where he was running him over or anything. He basically attacked him. But then what Jokic did is twice as bad. And he should take a real suspension. And I'm fine with 5 games. And the other 5 that I wanted him to have, give it to that refereeing crew. Because they're the ones who instigated the whole thing.
Yeah, I think, again, they did look like they wanted to get out of there. Like, you can tell, I've been to games where you can tell the officials, they're just done for the night. Like, they just had it. Like, they get to a certain point, they've been yelled at by the players enough. Maybe they've missed a few calls. Maybe they just want to get back to the hotel bar. Trust me, I've spent a lot of time at hotel bars with officials. And they're nicer there than they are when you see them on the court. But it did seem like they just wanted out. And they can't have that attitude because, as you said, like, you have to play it to the end. Like, look what happened in the Utah-Miami game, like the previous game. Like, that thing was over with 4 minutes left, and then all of a sudden it was a possession game at the end. So if the officials had treated that one that way, then, obviously, you wouldn't have been able to get a real result. So I'm with you on all of that. I don't think he'll get 5 games. I think he should. I don't think he will. I think they'll probably give him 2 games. And that they'll say that was significant, that he was provoked. Probably is probably the way that they'll internalize it. And I get it that he wasn't provoked to that. And so, but I do think, and I was talking about this before it came in, I do, before you came in, I do think that this could have a galvanizing effect on this team. Not that they really needed it because they seem fairly close, but it kind of solidified their closeness. I think we're going to find that, like, that they already sort of seem to have each other's backs. But the way that Jimmy handled that last night, this idea that Jimmy's a bad teammate, and then you look at who's with Jimmy, like UD, okay, like there, like, I mean, UD was waiting for that, like he wants to turn Jokic into his next Tyler Hansborough, who was the answers to one of our trivia questions we gave away the hats last night. I mean, UD wanted to go. Jimmy wanted to go. I mean, that wasn't like Dwight Howard, where he pretends he wants to go and he runs the other direction, or Kevin Garnett. I mean, Jimmy and Udonis were ready to go. I actually think, Alfredo, like, start of a long road trip that we knew was going to be a challenge to begin with. They're going to be together for a couple nights in Los Angeles together. I don't think it's such a bad thing long term.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's a good thing when you could remember when you got embarrassed, because sometimes you hear it, and even Eric Reed says it on the broadcast. He says, "Okay, this is one that you just throw away and forget about." Right? No, this is one that you got to remember. You went out there against Denver, a contender. Denver's a finals contender. They have the MVP. Like, it's kind of an important game. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to look good for the highlight package on ESPN. And you essentially didn't defend for any moment in that game. Yeah. And Will Barton was just lighting you up. I love Will Barton's game, but he shouldn't be getting to the rim as easily as he was. Yeah,
I mean, that's not his. See, that's the thing. You're right. That's not really. They were letting guys on Denver do things that they haven't been letting better players do. Like, you talk about Denver. Yes, Denver is a finals contender when they are healthy. No question. Like, that, when they are healthy, but they're not healthy. I mean, they didn't have Porter Jr. I know their numbers with him have not been good, and they still don't have Jamal Murray. So, I mean, you're talking about two of their four most important players are not there, and the Heat didn't have the situation where they typically have, where they're flying in on a back-to-back into Denver. They had it, they were able to prepare for it. They knew what they were getting into with this road trip, and they just didn't respond. I mean, again, the shooting is going to come and go. I think what's a little concerning is I thought that the defense would stay no matter what, even when they weren't shooting well. And in some games it has. Obviously, the first two early in the season, that was evidence of that. But, Alfredo, I guess my thing is, we've seen that there are some nights that they do let it seep in. And I felt like it seeped in last night. They had a lot of force at the end of that game with the whole situation. They didn't play with force during the game. Defensively. They were not physical defensively like they have been. And so, again, I'm with you. I think you throw away the result to a certain degree. Again, road trip, Denver, you're bound to have another clunker here early on. The schedule has been unrelenting. But with that being said, like, it's a little concerning. They've got to pull that stuff together so it all comes together. All right, so let's finish here with you. Again, underdogfantasy.com. Use code 5RSN. You need a trade show, or you need your booth for your trade show, go to everythingtradeshows.com. Does Tua play Thursday or not?
I hope so. For the fans, like, it's a Thursday night game. Like, there should be a decent crowd because it's a night game, and we don't get many of those because you got to be good to get those. So you would expect you're gonna get a better crowd than usual. It is Lamar Jackson, like, he's box office. Like, you want to go see a guy.
He's also local. He's also local too.
Yeah, you want to see a guy like that is so good and that exciting. You want to see him play. It wouldn't be a bad thing to see, Tua Tagovailoa play against him either, because you get to have a little bit of entertainment because, like I said, the Ravens defense has been poor this year, especially against the pass. So maybe it's close, maybe it's an entertaining game, and I hope he plays. If it's Brissett out there again, I don't know. I've seen a lot of bad backup quarterbacks. Brissett was not supposed to be this bad.
I know.
He just is.
Yeah, no, he is. I mean, it's amazing that he started as many games, and that, to a certain degree, the Colts, I get by default because Luck retired, but they did commit to him for a certain period of time. Which, when you watch him play regularly, it's nothing personal. He seems like a good guy. It's just he's just not good enough to man the position. All right, thanks to Alfredo Arteaga. You can follow him at Alf_Arteaga. Again, I'm going to be at both of the LA games for the Heat, so please, I guess, blame me in advance, but don't blame me later. do what it is you want to do. I do think they're going to bounce back, though, as Bam says. I think it will pull them together a little bit, and I think these two are winnable. The Lakers, again, not playing particularly well.
And no LeBron, so that's a must-win.
And no Bron. Yeah, you got to get it. All right, Al, thank you. Thank to our producer, Manny Chang. I'll be back.